Chapter 2, The Fire of the People, When Nations Believe Their Own Lies. The intricate dance of alliances and the cold calculations of imperial ambition, as we explored in the previous chapter, set the stage for catastrophe. But wars are not merely the decisions of kings and ministers. For a nation to march willingly into the abyss, for millions to embrace the ultimate sacrifice, something deeper must stir within the populace. In the Europe of 1914, a potent mix of fervent nationalism, a romanticized view of conflict, and a selective embrace of pseudoscience had taken root. Across the continent, citizens, inflamed by decades of carefully cultivated narratives, came to believe their own big lies, lies of national destiny, of inherent superiority, and of war as a glorious, cleansing force. This was the fire of the people, and it burned with an intensity that would incinerate the old world. The ultimate loyalty, how nationalism became a religion. Nationalism, in its purest form, can be a unifying force, fostering shared identity and purpose. But in the early 20th century, it mutated into something far more dangerous, an exclusionary, almost religious fervor that demanded ultimate, unquestioning loyalty and sanctioned aggression against any perceived other. The nation became an idol, its destiny a sacred crusade, and its glory worth any sacrifice. Pan-Slavism, Russia's grand crusade for its brothers. In the vast Russian Empire, a powerful and dangerous idea had taken hold, Pan-Slavism. This was the belief in the inherent unity and shared destiny of all Slavic peoples, Russians, Serbs, Bulgarians, Poles, Czechs, and others, often under the benevolent, protective wing of Mother Russia. It envisioned Russia as the cultural, spiritual, and even military protector of its Slavic brothers, particularly those chafing under the foreign rule of the Austro-Hungarian and Ottoman empires. This ideal resonated deeply in the Balkans, where independent Serbia, recently enlarged and emboldened, championed the cause of Serbs living in Austrian-controlled Bosnia. For many Serbs, Pan-Slavism was a promise of liberation. For Russian intellectuals and powerful circles within the Tsar's court, it was a divine mission. While presented as a noble quest for ethnic solidarity, Pan-Slavism was, in fact, a deeply destabilizing force. It directly threatened the multi-ethnic empires, particularly Austria-Hungary, whose very existence was predicated on controlling diverse populations. The big lie here was that ethnic unity could be achieved without violent upheaval, a notion that would soon ignite the southern frontiers of Europe. German greatness, the dreams of a master race. Parallel to Pan-Slavism, an insidious and increasingly aggressive form of Pan-Germanism spread across Germany. It was fueled by rapid industrial growth and a sense of having arrived late to the imperial feast. This ideology promoted the perceived superiority of Germanic culture, language, and people, asserting Germany's right, indeed, its destiny, to assert its power and influence on a global scale. This was more than just patriotism, it was a conviction that Germany was uniquely blessed, destined for a dominant role in Central Europe, Middle Europa, and a global empire, Weltpolitik. Intellectuals, academics, and powerful industrial and military figures propagated these ideas through books, newspapers, and schools. The German population was increasingly convinced that their nation possessed a unique culture that it was destined to spread, often by force. This pervasive belief in inherent national superiority was a dangerous, big lie, fostering an aggressive expansionism that made diplomatic compromise seem like a betrayal of national purpose. Unfinished maps, irredentism and the seeds of resentment. Compounding the grand, expansionist nationalisms were more localized, yet equally fervent, movements rooted in irredentism. This was the powerful emotional belief that parts of one's national territory, or populations belonging to one's ethnic group, were still outside the state's borders and must be redeemed or incorporated, by force if necessary. These unfinished maps kept nations constantly on edge, providing potent emotional justification for territorial claims and future conflict. France's enduring scar, the loss of Alsace-Lorraine in 1871, remained a gaping wound in the French psyche. For decades, French schoolchildren were taught about the lost provinces, fueling a deep-seated desire for revanche, revenge, and the return of the territories. Serbia's Greater Serbia. Emboldened by its recent successes in the Balkan Wars, Serbia dreamed of uniting all Serbs in a Greater Serbia, which inevitably meant absorbing Serbian populations within the Austro-Hungarian Empire, particularly in Bosnia-Herzegovina. This ambition directly threatened Austria-Hungary's territorial integrity. Italy's unredeemed lands. Despite being an ally of Germany and Austria-Hungary, Italy coveted Italian-speaking territory still under Austro-Hungarian rule, notably Trentino, Trieste, and parts of Dalmatia. This, Italia Irredenta, provided a powerful motive for Italy to consider abandoning its alliance if the Entente offered better terms. These deep-seated grievances, fueled by a powerful mix of history and emotion, meant that much of Europe's borders were contested, not just by politicians but by millions of citizens who believed that their nation's map was incomplete, a big lie that could only be corrected through conflict. The empire's captives, when minorities dreamed of freedom. Within the ancient, multi-ethnic empires, particularly Austria-Hungary and the Ottoman Empire, the suppression of distinct national identities created explosive internal pressure. Millions felt like captives within systems that denied them self-determination, fostering simmering resentments that contributed directly to the overarching instability. Austria-Hungary, a dual monarchy dominated by Germans and Hungarians, governed over a vast array of Slavic populations: Czechs, Slovaks, Poles, Croats, Slovenes, and Serbs. These groups, often speaking different languages and practicing different religions, yearned for greater autonomy or outright independence. The empire, paradoxically, was simultaneously trying to assimilate them while fearing their fragmentation. The rise of independent Serbia, acting as a magnet for South Slavs, was a constant source of anxiety for Vienna. The big lie that a multi-ethnic empire could endlessly suppress the rising tide of nationalism without consequence was reaching its breaking point. Meanwhile, within the declining Ottoman Empire, the plight of its Christian minorities, especially the Armenian people, offered a harrowing case study of repressed nationalism. Armenians, primarily Christian in a predominantly Muslim empire, had historically faced discrimination and occasional persecution. As the Ottoman Empire weakened and Turkish nationalism, Pan-Turkism, gained prominence, the Armenian struggle for greater autonomy or self-determination was viewed with increasing suspicion by the Ottoman government, who feared they would side with Russia. Their yearning for freedom was palpable. An Armenian intellectual, writing in the early 20th century, articulated this desperation: "We are a nation within a nation, a flame flickered by shadow. Our hope is in the light of true self-determination, not merely survival, not merely the breath of tolerance from others." This desperate struggle for identity and survival against a backdrop of imperial decline and rising nationalistic fervor contributed to the powder keg, as internal strife mirrored and exacerbated external tensions. The march to madness: why everyone thought war was a good idea. Given the inherent dangers of the alliance system and the deep-seated grievances across Europe, one might expect widespread alarm. Yet, remarkably, there was a pervasive, almost joyous embrace of the idea of war. Nations, caught in a feverish march to madness, seemed convinced that conflict was not just inevitable, but desirable, even necessary. This widespread delusion was a terrifying testament to the power of the big lie. Socialism's betrayal, the Workers' International that fell apart. Before the war, a powerful force existed that many believed could prevent such a conflict: international socialism. The Second International, founded in 1889, united socialist and labor parties across Europe, advocating for working-class solidarity and explicitly committing to oppose militarism and war. Its leaders, like Jean Jouers in France, vowed that workers would refuse to fight their comrades in other nations, threatening general strikes to paralyze any war effort. Yet, in August 1914, this promise of global solidarity fractured in a matter of days. When the calls to arms came, socialist parties across Europe, from the powerful German Social Democratic Party, SPD, to the French section of the Workers' International, SFIO, overwhelmingly abandoned their internationalist principles. Instead, they rallied to their respective national flags, voting for war credits and urging their members to defend the fatherland. The overwhelming, intoxicating power of nationalism and patriotic fervor proved far stronger than class solidarity. The big lie that international worker unity could overcome the pull of national loyalty proved to be just that, a lie, leaving the continent's working classes to march dutifully to their deaths. The cult of the uniform, when generals dictated destiny. In many European nations, particularly Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Russia, the military held immense prestige and pervasive influence. Generals and admirals were not just soldiers, they were revered figures, often operating with a degree of autonomy that transcended civilian political control. This led to the cult of the uniform, where military prowess and martial values were glorified throughout society. War itself was depicted not as a brutal, industrialized slaughter, but as a noble, purifying adventure, a test of national virility and courage. Popular literature, school curricula, and even children's toys promoted this romanticized vision. Military parades were grand spectacles of national strength, cementing the idea that the army was the ultimate embodiment of the nation's spirit. Within this environment, military leaders often held disproportionate sway in political decision-making, advocating for aggressive offensive strategies and dismissing diplomatic alternatives as weakness. The big lie that war was a glorious, short, and decisive affair, a romantic escapade for young men, would soon be violently disproven. Darwin's dark shadow, survival of the fittest nations. Adding a pseudo-scientific veneer to the aggressive nationalism was the widespread acceptance of social Darwinism. This perverted interpretation of Charles Darwin's theory of natural selection argued that nations, like species, were locked in a ruthless struggle for existence, where only the fittest, the most powerful, the most militaristic, the most racially pure, would survive and thrive. This ideology provided a chilling justification for aggression, imperialism, and the escalating arms race. It framed international relations not as a matter of cooperation or diplomacy, but as an inevitable, zero-sum competition for dominance. War, therefore, was not merely regrettable but a natural and necessary mechanism for national development and the weeding out of weaker states. The big lie that might makes right, given scientific credence, gave intellectual permission for an aggressive pursuit of national interest, no matter the human cost. Voices in the wilderness, the forgotten pacifists. Amidst the roaring tide of nationalism and the drumbeat of war, a few desperate voices rose in warning. Small groups of pacifists, feminists, and liberal thinkers foresaw the impending catastrophe, understanding that modern industrial warfare would be far more destructive than previous conflicts. Figures like Austrian Baroness Bertha von Suttner, a Nobel Peace Prize laureate whose novel Lay Down Your Arms became an international bestseller, actively campaigned against militarism. American social reformer Jane Addams championed international cooperation and peace. These voices in the wilderness warned of the dangers of the arms race, the folly of aggressive alliances, and the ultimate futility of war. They argued for international arbitration, disarmament, and universal human rights. Yet, their pleas were largely ignored, drowned out by the roar of patriotic fervor, the glorification of military power, and the powerful allure of national destiny. Public opinion, caught in the grip of the big lie that war was a necessary step to glory, was simply not receptive to their messages of peace and international cooperation. They were marginalized, dismissed as naive or unpatriotic, their foresight tragically ignored by a continent marching with terrifying enthusiasm towards its own destruction. The powder keg was packed, the fuses were laid, and the fire of the people burned fiercely, fueled by the conviction of their own righteousness and the dangerous, big lies they had come to believe. When the spark finally came, it would ignite a conflagration that no one, not even the most ardent nationalist, could have truly envisioned. The continent, primed for conflict, was about to discover the terrifying reality of its fatal fantasies.
The fire of the people was lit, fueled by dangerous beliefs. In Chapter 3, we'll witness the terrifying culmination of this fervor as Europe builds its ultimate gunpowder arsenal, creating the doomsday machine that would soon unleash unprecedented destruction. If you're eager to understand the arms race and fatal war plans, hit that like button and subscribe. Join us for the next chapter in this essential historical journey, or explore the full playlist. Thank you for listening.